Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm doing this in a slightly different format where it's just audio today because I was a little sick yesterday and I'm feeling better today, so I'm just kind of taking it chill and decided we're gonna go with a fully audible audio experience, which will be very similar to tomorrow's stream over on twitch.tv/KROOF_. I stream there Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, so if you'd like to go check out the Twitch, you can get on over there. But in today's video, I'm going to be talking about two elite specializations that, in my opinion, were the two worst out of the entire bunch of elite specialization, elite specs that arrived with End of Dragons, or that is arriving with End of Dragons. These two being the Catalyst and the Untamed. I had a lot to say about the Catalyst and a lot to say about the Untamed, as many of us did. So with this beta, I wanted to make a video about specifically the Catalyst and the Untamed, as I believe that a lot of changes were made to really accentuate the strong points about those elite specs and increase the flow of the elite specs as well. With this being said, I still think there are some core issues that I'm going to get into. First and foremost, what I liked. I really enjoyed the Catalyst's actual ability cycle, the flow of combat more so, with the activation of the spheres. The spheres no longer have a cast time, so you can instantly pop them down while you're channeling another ability, and I do enjoy that they are their own unique skills based on attunement. I like it. I think it's cool, and I think it overall makes it feel a lot better. I also really enjoyed the improvements to the augments and traits, so those are probably my standouts for the Catalyst. And then as for the Untamed, I really enjoyed that they've implemented all of the unleashed ambush skills for all of the weapons. I originally thought that it was going to be like the 5th skill or something, but no, they just went with the auto attack, the first skill. I also think they updated the cantrips pretty well, and I think that they've updated the traits pretty well, but I don't love some of the decisions, which we'll get into in the second half here. So that's kind of what I liked with the two. Now I'm going to go into more of my recommendations for each of the elite specs. I'm going to start with Catalyst, and I will be pulling from my Guild Wars 2 forum posts that I did on each of these elite specs. As a note, this video is entirely PvE focused. I didn't take him into PvP or War vs. World at all, which is kind of a new thing for me. I usually hit at least PvP, but not this time. So this will be PvE focused, and once again, we're all trying to suggest things where we can to hopefully make it feel better. Not everything I have here will be pristine or perfect, but this is kind of what I felt. So for Catalyst, specifically, let's talk about the hammer. While I like the changes, I think a core issue and the biggest issue that Catalyst faces is the hammer. While the flow of combat felt better with the Jade Spheres and the augments, the hammer still felt really clunky. Now, the orb mechanic, the third ability on the hammer, did activate instantly, and it was much faster, so objectively it was smoother. However, it was so smooth and it's on such a short cooldown that I just focus on utilizing those orbs. I feel like the bulk of my damage is just those orbs, and trying to get the final proc of Grand Finale when the buffs are at 1 or 2 seconds left is really all I was doing on the hammer, and it left what I would say 80%, 90% of the kit entirely useless to me most times, unless I was trying to combo in a field. But as a whole, I wasn't using the auto attack. I wasn't using the second skill. I wasn't using the fourth skill. It was a little strange, and I felt like almost the orb mechanic was the auto attack, because it was the thing that I was doing the most and focusing on. So I would love to see the orbs and the Grand Finale skill be deleted from the hammer and put somewhere else. I will just kind of touch on that right now because I think it makes the most sense. I would take the orbs and like the icy coil and the flame wheel buffs on the hammer and put them on the augment utility skills. Interestingly enough, the augment utility skills, when you pop and proc them, when you use them, there's a small orb that circles around the Catalyst's feet. So why not just make that orb bigger and replace it with the standard coils and orbs on the hammer third ability? I think this would also grant a little bit more interest for people to proc their augments in the specific orbs. It does create slightly more learning curve. It creates a little bit more mastery over knowing when you are proccing your spheres, when you're using your augment skills. But I think that's nice, and it won't necessarily be a Weaver 2.0 where you're just cycling through the attunements. Instead, because augments have a longer cooldown, you're going to want to ask yourself, which orb do I want to go for first, and etc, etc. I still think the orbs would need to maybe be brought down a little bit in power and have their duration extended by 8 seconds or up to 8 seconds, and get rid of the refresh mechanic where you pop another orb and it refreshes the duration. I think if it's just a standard buff for the augment on top of everything else, I think that would be interesting enough. Now let's talk about the hammer. Other portions of the hammer. So if we get rid of the third ability on the hammer, all of the orbs, what would this look like? Well, just create new and unique abilities for that specific attunement. So for fire, honestly, I want fire to be more of that melee focused. I think it doesn't do too well as ranged. So fire, Phoenix Feather. What if you like slam your hammer down, damaging and conjuring a fire field that grows in a road in front of you? And if you successfully strike an enemy, it prolongs the might duration on yourself. Just something more melee oriented, a little bit of a fire field generator on the weapon itself, I think would be nice. For water, the third ability could be Downpour. Summon a ring of water above you, crashing down around you and knocking down enemies. There's currently not a hard CC on the kit. There is one in air. Having a crowd control ability on water where you're in melee combat as a knockdown would be pretty nice. And once again, slot the hammer in more of that bruiser survival aspect. Next, for air, third ability could be Shock Frenzy. Summon a lightning orb at a location, which zaps one random enemy in the area with heavy damage each pulse. So this would be kind of more single target oriented, but would trigger in an area. And it would be really heavy damage. It would just like lightning zap one target. And then for Earth, the third ability could be Mud Bash. Bash your foe with a hammer, head of mud, striking them and spraying mud behind your target. All foes affected are slowed. I think having a little bit of slow would be nice on Earth because it is more of that self-sustained survival attunement. And slow, particularly in PvP, is really good to use because it gives you more reaction time, and even more reaction time to trigger, say, the fourth ability on Earth Hammer, which is your block, to then be like, oh, I can see their animation. I'm gonna now block and then get my aura effect. So those are just a couple ideas on the third skills, what you could do for that. And then what about the other attunements? My final little points would be fire. Once again, I had mentioned that this kind of feels more like melee oriented. Considering the third ability, the orb, gets more use out of melee, and the fifth ability also gets more use out of melee. I don't think this is really no, I want to say deserving, but I don't really think it fits the mid-range damage that air better slots into. So for fire, I would say the auto attack in the second skill would just be melee strikes, and then if you strike an enemy, fire bolts are sent out behind your target, giving you slightly more melee cleave options, and then triple sear would just kind of trigger around you. As for water, the second attack in the auto attack chain, Water Rush, I think this should heal you. I think that's one aspect about water that's kind of missing and is somewhat surprising. You only get one access to a healing ability on water, so I think maybe in the auto attack, having Water Rush give you a minor 80 heal per target struck would be nice, just to kind of have a little bit more self-sustain. And then finally for Earth, Stone Strike. First and foremost, I think this should be a melee auto attack chain, and then Stone Strike being the final hit around you. I think this should grant, similar to Water Rush, 80 barrier per target struck to kind of bolster yourself a little bit more. They were talking about Catalyst as being that self-sustain elite spec for elementalists. And while there were improvements, I still think having a little bit more consistent defense uptime with, Stone Strike barrier application, Water Rush, more healing application. And then finally for Earth, Whirling Stone, this is your second ability. That needs to be a world combo finisher. I mean, come on, everyone. It's right there. So that's what I would recommend. And now for the utilities. Once again, I think the Hammer Third orb abilities should be on the augments. So when you use Soothing Water or Shattering Ice in a water sphere, you gain Icy Coil. If you use Relentless Fire in a fire sphere, you gain Flame Wheel. Invigorating Air grants you Crescent Wind. And then Fortified Earth grants you Rocky Loop, etc., etc. One thing I will say for the utilities is the elite skill. I think this elite still needs some work. Elemental Celerity. I still think that this should grant an aura in addition to the boons when you are standing in the sphere. So if you use Elemental Celerity in a fire sphere, you would gain might, and you'd also gain an aura for a little bit more aura uptime application to slot better in with those aura traits as well. But even if you're not using those aura traits, auras are very useful. Additionally, I would add one other thing to this. This ability was changed to automatically reduce the cooldowns on whichever attunement you're in for that weapon. I also think that this should grant you 10 Jade Sphere energy, as there are very few abilities that actually give you more bulk energy. You gain energy passively through striking, and I believe there's 1 or 2 traits that grant you energy. I think only 1. That leads us to traits. I think the traits are better, but I have a couple ideas. First and foremost, the minor elemental epitome. I still think this should just be reduced to 8 seconds. I guess 10 is fine. It's just a very minor improvement, which I think could see some better use. And then now I want to talk about one trait which could receive maybe a bit more of a rework. This would be Spectacular Sphere. Honestly, this is a really boring trait in my opinion, because it just means that your Jade Spheres give you more boons. But what do Jade Spheres already do? They give you boons. So it's like, it's not really exciting. I don't think it's much of a master trait. If anything, it's more of like an adept trait. So here's my idea for Spectacular Sphere. 1, Jade Spheres deal more damage, 25%. Secondly, and this kind of is a callback to an old warrior trait, when you combo in a Jade Sphere, the effect duplicates for a second combo. I think that would be greatly more interesting. So much more flavor to that, instead of just like, you gain another boon. Oh, fire gives might. We're going to give you another stack of might. Oh, water, you're also applying vigor or something. I just think it could be a little bit more interesting and require a little bit more play than having a Catalyst elite spec build where it's like, I just place down my orbs and then I don't do anything. So I would like to see this come back to Catalyst, because the Catalyst already is a very combo field and comboing centric elite spec. I think it would slot in perfectly, more so than warrior. And then finally, as a minor buff for the Grandmaster, Staunch Auras. I really love this trait. Gain stability when you gain an aura. Remember how I was talking about there isn't a lot of ways to generate energy on Catalyst? Yeah, I think that this trait should also give you energy. So I would have Staunch Auras read, gain stability and energy upon gaining an aura. So this would be 1 stability for 3 seconds and 3 energy every time you gain an aura. This means if you're paired with an elementalist, or a tempest, I should say, not only are you gaining a lot of stability, but you're able to pump out those Jade Spheres even more, which indirectly means tempests are great providers of a specific profession mechanic, a specific profession energy, which, you know, is really interesting. So those would be my thoughts on Catalyst. I think a lot better. Just main issue with Hammer Third abilities, just give them their own unique abilities. Make it an actual weapon kit that isn't like a pseudo Weaver elite where it's like, now I gotta swap into all the attunements and I can't actually use the skills and plan. It feels really like you're playing a Weaver. I don't like it. I want Catalyst to be that slower, methodical bruiser. I would like to see that. Augments, put the orbs on there. It would make them a little bit more interesting. And then finally, for traits, Spectacular Sphere, I think could use a rework and give some more energy application to Staunch Auras. Now I'm going to talk about specifics for Untamed. Untamed, very few things. I like Untamed, and I don't have too many wide sweeping changes as I have with the Catalyst. So yeah, Untamed, Hammer. I kind of think the spores on the melee unleashed attacks, and this isn't just for Hammer, I should say. I think this is really just weapons in general. The unleashed ambush skills for melee all spawn a spore under your targets that are hit. I don't think it's cool. It feels really weird. It feels kind of shoehorned in, and it doesn't make much sense for like sword or great sword, and I don't really see much use out of it. So I would say get rid of the spores and then bake it into a trait. So for traits, let's get into that. I think utilities are fine. Traits, Nature's Shield. Cantrips grant barrier to you and your pet. I love this change. Much more survivability. I think this should actually also incorporate a trait that is the minor trait. That's Natural Fortitude's Life Siphon. I think they should just reallocate the Life Siphon from Natural Fortitude and put it on Nature's Shield as well. So I would like to see this trait provide barrier and then also allow unleashed ambush skills to steal life. Like 600 life siphon damage. I think it could also be nerfed a little bit. And then 1,000 life siphon healing and additional healing per target struck is lowered. As for Blinding Outburst, Venomous Outburst deals more damage and blinds targets. I think that's fine. I think this is where you should take this trait to summon your Spore. I would also add to this Unleashed Ambush skills, summon a Spore under the targets, under the struck targets. This would mean Venomous Outburst, more damage, you got that blind, and then you also have an extra Spore application of minor damage and minor poison application. Natural Fortitude, of course, once again, remove the Life Siphon and put it on Nature's Shield. It makes more sense. Nature's Fortitude as a minor is really strong. It's wildly strong to the point where I think this is maybe a better nerf because then you actually have to take it to maybe get some more damage from the Life Siphon. And then finally, Ferocious Symbiosis. You might be like, but KROOF, the Unleashed Ambush skill damage increase was removed on Blinding Outbursts. What do we do? I say just put it on the Grandmaster. So Ferocious Symbiosis would have more reason. You and your pet grant each other increased damage and movement speed when striking enemies. Additionally, Unleashed Ambush skills deal increased damage, as this is like your pure damaging Grandmaster trait. I think seeing that passive increase in damage and movement speed is cool, but adding that one extra incentive to take this trait of the 25% increased damage on Unleashed Ambush skills is just what Unleashed needs and what this trait needs to kind of be more competitive with the other two. So everyone, that is my video on the Catalyst and Untamed, the two hammer elite specs for End Dragons. While I really enjoy and am very much impressed with the pace of changes and how the changes were actualized in Beta 4, there were just some issues still that I had with both Catalyst and Untamed. Once again, it's still a little sad for Untamed that there isn't more pet interaction and more pet diversity and customization. But hopefully down the line we might see a little bit of that. But yes, thank you everyone so much for coming by. Comment down below what you thought about the Catalyst and the Untamed. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Give your specific reasonings. I would love to hear you down below. Subscribe if you want to see more Guild Wars 2 videos. I'll have them coming where I do a video on the elite specs that I thought really won this Beta 4. And if you'd like to help support the channel, I have a Patreon down below. And if you've not pre-ordered End of Dragons yet, I also have links down below there that greatly help me out. So thank you everyone so much for dropping by, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye everyone.